Welcome back everyone, I'm Setharoth, and as you can see, today's video ran into a couple of glitches, but we're still going to go into the Sacrosanct mod for vampires. This week I wanted to show you guys how the Sacrosanct mod changed your characters based on their race. It adds in a racial power for each character. I was trying to load a character to show you, to change the race of my character, like I did in my Imperius presentation. I was trying to use a spell from Fenderix that works really well for that. But unfortunately, in order to bring in, was that True Hybrid that allows my werewolf and vampire mods to run simultaneously, so I can be both. That also affects your racial abilities, and unfortunately when I changed the race of my character, the vampiric ability didn't show up either. And then I loaded a new character and that vampiric ability didn't show up either, and I realized it was because these mods are overwriting things in such a way that you have to actually get to vampirism the old-fashioned way, rather than just hitting a few buttons and spawning in as a vampire with the racial abilities. Specifically the racial abilities was what I was trying to unlock. So long story short, we're just going to go to the main page for Sacrosanct. And I'll tell you guys exactly what abilities you can unlock depending on which race you start as a vampire. For the Altmer, if you're a high elf, you have Wine and Revelry. This allows you to increase your magicka by 50 points for a full minute when you feed. Now, if the victim is sleeping, that buff will last you a full 600 seconds, which is about 10 minutes. Now, obviously this caters more to a mage playthrough, and technically it's not that hard to find a sleeping victim if you coordinate your attack appropriately. For example, if your quest is a short distance from a village of some kind, you wait till nightfall, till someone's asleep, go in, get some blood to top you off, and you're good for the next 10 minutes. It's not necessarily a game-breaking buff, but I like the idea of having an extra 50 points of magicka, particularly for 10 whole minutes. I think that's a clever racial ability to add in for a class that was already prone towards magic. I really like the jeweled scales buff for the Argonians. Since they are more of an aquatic race, they actually are protected against the effects of sunlight while they are swimming, and for 180 seconds after leaving the water. That's about 3 minutes. I really like that idea because if you remember from my Imperius demonstration, the Argonians get increased swim speed, so you end up looking at rivers and lakes as transport routes, right? They become your roads because you can move so much faster down those than you can when you're on foot. And I love the idea that the mod are built on that, and added in that you can basically survive as a vampire without any sunlight issues as long as you can keep yourself cool enough in the water. I think that was a really nice flavored way to support that Argonian kind of aquatic build in a way that didn't make anything too overpowered. The Bosmer, the Wood Elves, get a particularly interesting ability called Bitter Sap. You develop 100% weakness to poison, so watch out for those Draugr. However, when you consume alchemy ingredients, their effects are reversed and 10 times stronger, which basically means, you remember when you're first unlocking alchemy and you start just sampling ingredients left and right? Because their effects are so weak, you don't really have to worry. Well, you would have to be very careful as a vampiric Bosmer because, well, you need to know what you're eating because it'll be 10 times as effective. So you want to make sure at least that you have health potions on hand, because if you taste some nightshade not knowing that it's 10 times stronger, that could be a problem. Although it does say that the ingredients are reversed, so I assume that means their effects. So then like nightshade would heal you? That's weird. Yeah, it might be interesting to try a Bosmer playthrough as an alchemist with Sacrosanct just to see what it does to your alchemical experience. I don't know. That could be fun. You might have to think about that for a later video. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see a video revolving around that, because I do have another mod for alchemy. It was the Complete Alchemy Overhaul. I haven't done any videos on it yet because there's just so much to it. There it is, Complete Alchemy and Cooking Overhaul. I've been meaning to go over that, but if it sounds cool to see how a Bosmer vampire would roll through that, let me know in the comments below and I'll add that to my list. Next is Dolmen Haunt. This is what I showed in my showcase of Sacrosanct as a Breton. It enables you to feed by activating a standing stone. So if you want to start off as a vampire, or perhaps you're playing as a heroic character that doesn't want to eat people to stay alive, choosing a Breton might be a good way to do that, because then you're a vampire that kind of feeds off of, I guess, your ancestors or the magic of the standing stones. I don't know. But that might be one of your best options for a morally selfless vampire playthrough. Another option you might consider is choosing a side in the Civil War and then only feeding on members of the opposing side. That's one that I saw in the Reddit chats about how to run a morally positive vampire that doesn't just go around killing everyone. Next, the Dunmer, the Dark Elves, get a very interesting one called Tainted Blood. They feed on people and it grants you their racial ability. You can only have one at a time. So if you are a Dark Elf and you feed on a Breton, now you can access the activating a stone as feeding ability. And then if you chow down on a Bosmer next, now your consumed alchemy ingredients are 10 times stronger and their effects are reversed. And so on and so forth. So if you want to get a more wide view of what all these are like to play with without running 10 different characters, start as a Dunmer. And then just be careful who you eat. Maybe have a list of 10 NPCs, one for each race, that you can find in the major holds. And that would give you an easy way to sample and test each of those powers without necessarily having to run like 10 full playthroughs. The Imperials get an interesting one called Cult of Shadows. Their Shrine Blessings also increase their magicka and stamina by 25 points, but their effects are reversed. So then you have to be judicious with which shrine blessings you pick. I remember before I was running like my vampire character, my werewolf character, because they're immune to disease. But your regular mortals get diseases occasionally, and shrine blessings are an easy way to get those healed. But while going in as an Imperial vampire gives you a nice buff to magicka and stamina, technically that's 5 levels, because that's 50 points, you don't get 10 per level. So that's 5 extra levels of stats, which isn't bad. But you would need to be careful about what the effects of each shrine are to make sure that the one you're using isn't going to hurt your character. You know, if you're doing a melee character, two-handed sword, or a shield and sword type, then losing a couple points of magicka isn't going to be that big a deal. On the other hand, if you're a spellcaster and you suddenly double the respawn time for one of your mage abilities, that could get you killed. So you want to... this is one of the things I really like about this guy's mods, is there's always a level of depth to them. So if you want to do something simple, you can grab your Breton and just feed on standing stones and life's good. If you want to try something more ambitious, you can go as a Dunmer or an Imperial or a Bosmer, and now you have to track like what the new reverse effects of various mechanisms of the game are, which I think is great, particularly if you've done a lot of playthroughs and you're trying to add in something new to spice things up. Flipping the effects of shrine blessings or alchemy ingredients is a really creative way of doing that, I think. Next is the Khajiit. They get a vampiric ability called Misfortune. You bring bad luck. In combat, your enemies within 50 feet have a 5% chance to trip and fall. So everyone around you just becomes a little more clumsy. Let's see. So there are a couple of mods from this same guy, actually, Sidon, that you could combine with this to an interesting effect. With Apocalypse, you can get a spell so that if someone stumbles, a spear of earth comes out of the ground and knocks them into the air. Granted, it is a master level spell, so it's not something you would have for an entire playthrough, but given that your Khajiit ability as a vampire would actually cause them to stumble and possibly fall, that would be an interesting combination to use with an alteration mage. And I know it sounds like it would take a long time to level up to master skills, but actually if you use Akatao's Recital so that you're automatically casting a protection spell on you every time you enter combat, your alteration skill levels up surprisingly quick. So just keep that in mind. Also, there is a vampiric ability in Sacrosanct, we're going to get into it in another video when I get into what happens when you level up as a vampire, that allows you to feed while someone's staggered, which I think is just, it matches the animalistic side of being a vampire, right? So you use Unrelenting Force at just the first word so that they stumble a little bit, and then your character can run in and just feed on them, like pulls their head aside, grows for their neck. It looks very feral, and I like it. But you could combine that as well with this, because in Sacrosanct there's a vampiric ability that allows you to feed when in combat when someone stumbles, which I think is another great way. I wonder if that's why he did that for the Khajiit, because then your cat can literally run around chomping on people's necks during combat. And if you went with an all-claw build, I've seen people try to do that. That would be fun too, because Khajiits, their unarmed damage is based off their claws, not their fists. So that would actually be, if you did like a, what would that be? That would be like an animalistic vampire build. I don't know what you'd even call that, like blood and claw or something. But you have a Khajiit that is all melee range, but it's just claws and his vampire powers. That could be pretty cool. Next we have the Nord. This is a hail to Nordic ancestry. It's the ability called From Ancient Soil. Once per battle, you may activate a corpse to reanimate it. The corpse crumbles to dust when combat ends. Now, the first thing I notice about this is I don't see a level restriction. It just says a corpse. So I assume that means you could be fighting Draugr, take out a Deathlord Draugr, animate it, and now it's backing you up until combat ends. Which, that could work out pretty good. Particularly if you... Okay, I have a brain that likes to try and break the game or figure out how to optimize the system. So you notice this corpse lasts until combat ends, right? So what you do is you leave a squishy guy in room A after you've resurrected the biggest, baddest thing in that room. And then you run into the next room just enough to start combat, right? Just enough to tick things off in the next room. And then your big bag bandit chief, if that's who you chose to reanimate, his time that he lasts doubles because you just started another combat while inside the first combat because you didn't kill the first squishy guy. Does that make sense? Like, you can chain these. As long as you move quick enough to bring in more and more bad guys, your corpse won't wear off until combat ends. So if you grab a big bandit captain, you could possibly take him with you through almost an entire dungeon if you moved fast enough and left a weak hostile for him to chew on while you went into the next room to start another fight. It's just a fun idea, particularly if you have a follower that can help deal with if you go into the next room and there's more fight than you wanted. Next we have the Orcs. This is called Lavish Brutality. Feeding increases stamina by 50 points for a minute, or if the victim is sleeping, 600 seconds I should say, not points, 1 minute or 10 minutes. Again, that fits the Orcs perfectly. They're big on power attacks. I like that a lot. Again, you would want to time your missions, I guess, so that you picked missions that were near settlements so that you could find someone that was sleeping and then go to town. Yeah, technically, if you, let's see, so feeding increased stamina. Oh, geez, I can't believe I missed this. So if feeding gives you a buff to your magicka and stamina, it lasts longer if the victim is sleeping, right? It doesn't make it more potent, it just lasts longer. But if you already have something that allows you to like feed when an opponent is staggered, and you can use Fustro Da to stagger them, then you can renew this buff basically every combat as long as it's something that can be fed upon. Rather than having to wait for the next night falls to find another sleeping victim, you can actually chain your feedings with some of the vampiric abilities you can unlock in Sacrosanct. And then you can be just, you go into your fight, you feed on your first victim, boom, stamina's up by 60 seconds, but you just have to remember to keep re-upping it when you're in the next fight. Last but not least, we have the Redguard, called the Ruler of Locusts. Once per battle, activate an enemy humanoid to send insects to deal 5 poison damage for 60 seconds. That is 300 poison damage in a minute. That's bordering on overpowered. I know there's a lot of creatures that do just fine against poison, but can you imagine being like a level 5 character and being a Redguard vampire and already having this 300 damage in a minute, bad guy be gone? I'm still trying to figure out whether that was an ability for a heavy melee fighter, right? Because it's basically a damage over time spell. So if you've slain all the other bad guys and it's just that big bandit chief in Nordic armor and you can lay that on him to do a little extra damage while you try to survive. But I feel like a stealth type could make advantage of that too, because you just gotta tag them with it and then run. I mean, if you're under level 10, how many things are going to have 300 health? But then again, that's just for things that are weak against poison. So obviously there are things that are immune. I found out the hard way vampires are immune to disease, particularly after I modded them, and then suddenly I had to run screaming for my life as my little necromancer. Anyway, so that is everything I wanted to show you guys today. I'm sorry I wasn't able to figure out how to quickly hop to each race in-game. I think some of the mods that I have in place to allow me to do Growl and Sacrosanct at the same time actually prevented those abilities from popping earlier with every transition, right? I mean, there was a spell to change my race, but the vampiric ability wasn't following suit. So if I find a way around that at a later date, I might do another video just so you guys get the full demonstration. But I feel like we were able to get a couple solid ideas out as to different builds that you could use with these races, particularly considering some of the vampire abilities that are already there. And I guess some of you guys have asked to see my load order, so I figured I'd take a few minutes to go over that as well. I have some stuff that works on the back end to enhance what the mods can do even outside of the main game engine, like with Papyrus and SKSE. Definitely have Sky UI. The .NET script framework is an interesting one. That I don't remember which mod that was required for, but it does have an interesting bonus I can show you. In most cases, whenever I have a crash, let's open this one up. It will actually keep a record, right? So I had an unhandled exception, and then it recorded the mods and the files that it was processing at the time of the crash. So it's an interesting way to try and go back and figure out what possibly caused the crash, rather than just thinking, okay, what was the last mod I installed? Hopefully this crash is coming from that mod, but there's no real way to be sure. If you guys know of an easier way to do some kind of logging whenever there's a crash and which mods could possibly be causing it, I'm open to suggestions. I've only been modding for about 6 months now. The best that I've been able to do so far is actually I'll go with the big screen. There we go. All right, the biggest one I've tried so far, I call it my everything profile. As said, it has just about everything. The problem is it started crashing pretty quick, so I've got to figure out if some of the newer stuff that I was trying was responsible, or if some of the older stuff was just finally acting out. Yeah, so this is where I'm at so far. This is the profile that I've been using for my demos. I made it to about level 50 before things started crashing, but they started crashing soon after doing these Civil War mods. So I'm thinking I will remove those for my next playthrough. But one of the downsides of modding and YouTube channeling that I did not expect was that I don't want to destroy all this and start over yet, because I just got a guy up to my fully powered vampire with all the perks and everything. I want to show you guys it all. And then unfortunately I also unlocked all of the Thunderchild shouts with this guy. So it'll probably be a while before I can actually dismantle all this and start over. But it'll be worth it, because I'm also running my Necromancer playthrough off of this. So we'll be sticking with this load order for quite some time, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm excited to get into, I'm hoping with my next build, I guess I can show you a couple of the mods that I'm trying to add. One of them is interesting NPCs that adds in, I think it's 150 other NPCs into the Skyrim world. But each of them has a unique backstory and dialogue, and there's like 15 of them are followers, and a bunch of them have quests. So it just adds a lot more variety to Skyrim and makes it feel more populated and more interesting. And there's a couple of other overhauls like to make things look better. Men of Winter is an interesting one. It's kind of like Bidgen, but obviously just for the men. Overhauls how they look and gives them some better textures and stuff. Another one I might do a video on later is called Spell Research. I don't know how well I would with Spell Research. You combine it with another mod, no spell tomes, right? So you can't buy spell books, and you can't, you will rarely find, they don't randomly spawn as loot. You'll find a couple of spell books where they've been actually hand placed by modders or the game, but you remove all the spell books basically from the Skyrim world, and then you use this mod Spell Research, which allows you to actually learn the ingredients of a spell, like the type of casting that it uses or the type of school of magic or the element, and then develop it over time through experimentation and stuff. It's very immersive, but it also takes a long time. Obviously, it's a lot slower than just buying that master's tome from a mage and then learning the spell instantly, but it is a lot more rewarding in the long run. So I might do a video on that one later. That's another one that looks fun. And I think that's everything that I've been looking at. I have, I guess I will show you the next. This, you guys have been requesting mysticism, so I just want to show you guys proof that that's coming, because I do have a mysticism here. Someone actually suggested I combine it with the Apocalypse spell mod, because mysticism, it modifies a lot of the vanilla spells to make them more Oblivion-esque, and then mixes in more spells to make to build on those effects, right? So an Oblivion-esque spell for novice level is similar, just buffed when you get up to the adept stage or an expert, or up the higher schools of magic. Yeah, so that's everything that's going on right now in my little modding world. I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown, and hope you got a couple of fun ideas for different races that you might want to use with Sacrosanct. There's a little bit of everything here. I really like how each of these races has a certain bent, whether that be toward magic or thief or combat. It feels like the modder was really trying to accommodate all of the player types, all of the different ways you can play Skyrim, and then bring in some element of vampirism that would enhance or augment that playthrough style in some way. Anyway, that's it for me today. I will have another video out in a couple days, and that one will be a full playthrough. Actually, I can actually show you from here, so I can give you a bit of a spoiler. All right, so for example, the Blue Blood quest line, where you have to feed on the most powerful people in Skyrim, I'm going to do a video that will be a bite-by-bite playthrough of how and who you need to feed upon in order to get the final buff for Blue Blood, which, spoiler alert, makes you immune to non-lethal sunlight, which is very helpful. And then after that, we will be doing the Hemomancy, which is blood magic. That's where you have to actually drain people to death. After a certain number of drainings, you unlock more spells. I think at this point my character is only at 6 drainings, so I will do a video where you get to watch the other 22 drainings, and then we'll play with the spells and figure out all that. So that's a little bit of what is coming. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and let me know if any of these particular races or racial abilities for Sacrosanct really appealed to you, or if you thought some of them were redundant or ridiculous. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Take care.